to infinity and beyond!
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No. I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Johnny Sobchak for the first episode in a very long time. It has been a minute, Johnny. How are you? Are you so excited to talk about the MCU today?
I'm doing well, Zach. I don't know how excited I am to dive into MCU material, but I'm curious to see what you have to say about your latest experience with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But we have that to talk about, as well as some interesting news in TV and film, trailers, release dates, that sort of thing. And then, of course, The Last of Us, which has been really the main focus for a lot of people over the last couple months in entertainment. So plenty to catch up on there as well.
Yeah, all of those things that you just mentioned, The Last of Us, the new trailers we've got, the news, that's all far more exciting than anything coming from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, unfortunately. So that was just me who saw that. Johnny did not submit himself to Kevin Feige and his machine, so I will be taking that on at the end of the episode here. Johnny can chip in and ask any questions about the experience. But before all that, we've got our Last of Us review, our news, and of course, just our little discussion here. But first and foremost, make sure that you are subscribed to the Rewind newsletter so you don't miss out on anything that we are sharing on YouTube, on the website, on social, anywhere. We've got some good giveaways coming up and some interviews coming soon. So stay tuned. It's going to be very exciting. Johnny, it's been about a month since our last podcast. There has been some time. What have you been watching? I know there is one particular thing that I am like a proud parent knowing that you're watching or have watched at this point.
Yes, I finally, years later, took the dive and watched the first 2 seasons of Ted Lasso.
Woo!
As you know, and as I've talked on here many a time at this point, Apple TV Plus, I think, is really top tier as far as their shows and films and that sort of thing, especially compared to Netflix and some of these other streamers. And Ted Lasso has pretty much been their flagship program, I would say, for the duration of their existence, like the last 3 years or so. And I've been checking out other shows, but this one, just for whatever reason, I kept putting it off, and much to your chagrin, of course. And
it was killing me inside.
And I finally got on it, started this year, because I knew the 3rd season was not too far off. I made a promise that I would get caught up before the 3rd season comes out, especially knowing that it could potentially be the final one. And I stuck true to that. And within about a week or two, I think, myself and my girlfriend Reagan, we binged pretty much like the 2 seasons. So it lived up to the hype. It is very, very funny, very, very heartwarming, smartly written, very well performed. And it's, of course, the other thing, I don't know if I mentioned this on this podcast specifically, but I played soccer my entire life and am an avid fan of soccer. So to, see something that is very much in depth into like that culture and kind of how that works. I'm not a big sports person when it comes to like sports movies and sports shows, which is kind of ironic because I'm a pretty big sports person in general. But this one is definitely, I think, on the top, like upper echelon of things that it's about soccer, football, but it is obviously it's really about like the characters and their relationships
Right.
and all the different themes and whatnot. So I just really think it's a nice potent mixture of goodness and I really would recommend it to anyone that is like myself, maybe pushed it off for no good reason, maybe.
I think you were the last person on earth to watch Ted Lasso, Johnny. It seems that way.
Yeah, it sure seems that way, but I can't really praise it enough. I'm sure maybe you have some specific questions, but I am a huge fan. I like Jason Sudeikis in other things that I've seen, Horrible Bosses, SNL, and whatnot. But this is obviously his starring vehicle. It's been a huge success for him, and he's had some creative input as well. Behind the camera, not just as the star, and then the supporting cast, like just so many people that were, I don't want to say completely unknown, but not names that would be as recognizable or faces that would be as recognizable as maybe Sudeikis would be. Brett Goldstein and Hannah Waddingham and it's been Juno Temple. Like there's a lot of great, I think just the way that they mix and match all the different personalities and whatnot has been really great. And then also the writing, of course, is what really, makes the show on top of that, like the characters, but then also just the like snappy dialogue and kind of the arcs that they put these characters through and just the dramatic, when it comes to like the matches that they play, but then also, other elements of the football world and whatnot. It's just a really good balance of everything, I think. So it keeps it, as long as there's also that comedy that runs through it all, there's also a lot of, tension and dramatic, weight to everything. And also in that same vein, like emotional weight. Like I think that it's not just all fun and games necessarily. It's a good set of three-dimensional characters to follow it and whatnot, their development and everything. So I can't praise it enough, really. Certainly one of my favorite shows of the last few years, and I'm really excited now that I get to watch the third season live as it comes out.
Which is not too far away, because in the time since our last podcast, there's been a ton of development, namely that Ted Lasso season 3 is coming out March 15th. We had a teaser, and we have now had, as of today, a full trailer for the new season. But I'm so excited for you. I love hearing that, all of the enthusiasm for it. I think one of my questions for you, the first season and the second season have two very different feelings, very different tones, I would say. The first one was mainly like inspiring, uplifting, and then the second one being more, okay, like not everything is happy-go-lucky. Everybody has their battles, they're fighting their demons. A lot of the writers have talked about it, like Jason Sudeikis. I don't know exactly by name who all has touched on this, but for a long time there's been the theory that, or the comparison, that this is another thing that you have not watched, the original Star Wars trilogy of like the first one is A New Hope, like okay, like we're getting started, and the second one is Empire Strikes Back for season 2, where everybody's separated, they're all down, it's the hardest things that they've ever faced, and that people are expecting that the third season will have like a Return of the Jedi style arc. All of this to say, what were your differences, what were your takeaways from like season 1 versus season 2? Did you prefer one over the other, or was it all kind of just seamless because of how quickly you watched it?
I would say, yeah, I'm sure maybe it would be different with a lot of time in between, but I really didn't have a like preference per se. I also didn't think that it's noticeable kind of how they tweak certain things, and there's shifts in certain areas as far as how the characters are written and which themes they decide to explore and everything. But I thought it was, second season just as good as the first, I think. It's just different in some ways. And I like how they dive into the mental health of Ted especially, but really everyone at the club. And, that entails getting more backstory about Ted, more backstory and insight to Rebecca, that character, and also like the new character that comes in as the therapist, the doctor. I thought that was that, again, that plays into everything else, but she herself was also, a fun addition with a good performance. And that includes other characters like Jamie, Roy, where you get a lot of extra, and Keeley, especially the relationship between Keeley and Roy. Like it's just more. I think as happy and as fun as the first season is, I think it had to go this route. Otherwise, you're just getting more of the same, and I don't think
Right.
anyone
It's
would really want that.
I feel like people would be content with it, but it wouldn't be anything like groundbreaking, you
Yeah,
know, that this
exactly.
they would be happy because we just love season one so much, but instead of just like resting on their laurels of being like, oh, this is the happy comedy, that instead they
Yeah.
took it to the next level, pushed it further, and like you said, did all of these things to keep people on their toes and to just like further expand on this.
Yeah, and it works, and I felt the emotion. I had the reaction that I'm sure they were going for in the right spots and everything. So that was great. And there's even parallels to things in the first season, like seeds that were planted in the first season come to fruition
So
in
good.
season. So that I think I really don't think they missed a beat. I can see why some people maybe wouldn't be as big of a fan of it, but I loved it just as much, really. And my only hope at this point is that it's not a big break for me between the season 1 and season 2 and season 3. It's gonna be a couple weeks basically, but my only hope at this point is that they can continue the momentum that I'm feeling right now, and that season 3 can match up to those first 2 seasons. Because this is definitely the biggest, I would say, layoff between, as far as like time and everything, and kind of just how successful the show has been, and they get to kind of like, there is that pressure, and you have the outside influences and everything, and
Right.
she's very curious, I guess, to see how that all factors in. But no reason to think that the creative crew can't keep the magic alive, hopefully.
Yeah. The big thing here, obviously, is the speculation of like, is this going to be the final season? Everything like signs are pointing to yes, that was the initial plan, but Apple has been like, oh, we'll make as many as Jason wants to because we love this show. But
Yeah.
then like when you look at it from the like production timeline perspective, it's like, okay, like Jason is show running this time, like he's tinkering with it because this is his baby and he's making sure it has the perfect ending. That's like what people are reading into it.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot, like you said, the outside pressure, like meeting the expectations, all of that, that like this is why it has taken so much longer than expected, but it'll be here before we know it. And part of the reason that it's maybe has taken longer is because of another show that's been going on that I know you're watching and loving as well, that was your gateway to Ted Lasso in Shrinking, which I as I get into my list of what I've watched here, I know we just spent a minute on Ted Lasso, but I rewatched Shrinking from start to finish. And I know you're loving that. You tweeted the other day about Harrison Ford. You're fully on board the Emmy campaign.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% there. I'm waving the flag for Harrison Ford, supporting actor. He is so delightful and just very different from anything else I think I've really seen with him. He's always had some great comedic timing and as Indiana Jones and Han Solo and those iconic characters, but to see him play something that isn't part of a franchise, it's not a big budget blockbuster movie or show. It's just a nice kind of almost quaint dramedy. I really do enjoy him on this show, and really the whole cast. I mean, the show we'll talk about a little bit more probably, but I'm just really enjoying this one as well. Not on the same level as Ted Lasso, but a lot of the same feelings, I would say, emotionally, and kind of some of the themes they explore.
Yeah, it very much feels similar in the like, oh, this is a comedy, but it's about very serious matters, and it deals with these like nuances of real life and real world issues. It carries the weight of them. That like it feels like it could be in the same universe just because it has that same like craft of the people who are making it. But
are you proposing a Ted Lasso Shrinking cinematic universe, Zach?
maybe not a whole universe, maybe just like a crossover episode like they used to do on Disney Channel of a That's So Sweet Life of Hannah Montana, perhaps. Maybe get if Doc Sharon has to go somewhere else to a different club, that they can bring in Jimmy or Harrison Ford as the sports psychologist or therapist. That could be an easy in for them there.
Apple, you hear this? Get this man on the phone.
Make it happen. Other stuff I've been watching, obviously The Last of Us. We're about to get into some of that here in a minute. Hello Tomorrow, another show on Apple. Check it out if you haven't yet. Outer Banks season 3, absolutely absurd, not even in a good way. I'm very disappointed. I haven't finished it yet. I know the whole season came out, but um, you know, I vouched for first season was like a roller coaster. It was a lot of fun. Second season was like an upside down roller coaster. And it was just like, okay, at this point, I know this is very dumb, but it's still very fun. And this season isn't even fun. It's just like pure absurdity. So I'm very disappointed there. I'm still catching up with You season 4. I'm riding with Abbott Elementary season 2. I'm ready for the smackdown between Abbott and Ted Lasso season 3 at the Emmys in September. We just talked a lot about Ted Lasso. I got the screener. I got to check out the first episode of season 3, but I can say absolutely zero more. So moving right along to movies, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Stick around, you'll hear about it in a minute. And I'm adding in a new section here. I'm reading Fire and Blood. Just wanted to touch on that because, man, this is the source material for House of the Dragon. And all I have to say is woof. I'm like 75% done with it. This is like a 700-page book.
Oh my gosh.
But I had a lot of I recently was on vacation and I had a lot of time on the plane to read. But you know what, this is gonna get into some things are gonna get bleak here. I don't want to spoil anything. I know you're avoiding any sort of future plot points, but it's been very interesting. It was cool, like probably the first like 200-ish 300 pages maybe were like pre House of the Dragon, so that was very fun to like learn about the the initial Targaryen conquest and everything leading into where we meet Rhaenyra and Viserys and Daemon, all of them. And then now I am past the events, or I guess I'm at like what will be the end of House of the Dragon maybe, and have a little bit to go. So fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a crazy couple seasons of this show when they finally get around to churning it out. But that's what's been taking up my time. Johnny, anything else on your end outside of Lasso and Shrinking?
Oh man. Lasso was really the big, heavy hitter, just time wise and whatnot. No new releases really that we've been diving into so much. I have made a couple trips to the theater, actually 3 trips total so far this year. Just real quick, I saw my first film in theaters was Infinity Pool, Brandon Cronenberg's new horror film, kind of sci-fi horror. Big fan of Cronenberg, like his father in general. Like I really like what I've seen from him. I also really liked Brandon's previous film, Possessor. Maybe my number 1 horror film like of this decade so far. It's very dark, very disturbing, violent and whatnot, but it hit the right notes for me. And Infinity Pool, thankfully, a little bit of a lighter affair, more kind of satirical and comedic in some ways. Still dark, still violent, but I enjoyed it for sure. I'd recommend it if you want to check that out. It's on video on demand now. And then I also saw Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin with Dave Bautista as kind of I think this is really only maybe a couple other films where he's had like top billing. But Dave Bautista kind of showing off his chops in something that's not a comic book movie or sci-fi or anything like that. Just a good old fashioned Shyamalan, low kind of mid-budget thriller. And I really, really enjoyed that as well. Nothing too crazy, not like one of his best films, I would say, but just a nice, solid, not necessarily return to form for Shyamalan because he's been kind of hanging in there the last few years, but I thought it was an improvement over Old, which I was not like kind of one of the minority fans of, I guess. And then the most recent trip was a couple weeks ago around Valentine's Day. My girlfriend and I went to see the Titanic 3D re-release.
I did see that.
Yeah. And as I'm sure you would agree with me, Zach, it was phenomenal. So awesome to see that on the big screen. I watched it all the time when I was a kid. I had that kind of double barrel VHS tape set up, and kind of a weird movie for a kid, I guess, maybe to get into. But I feel like when you're a kid, Titanic and like those sorts of things, those disasters and historical kind of significant things, those are always kind of fun. You kind of obsess over certain things like that.
There's like your childhood obsession.
Yeah, exactly. And then the movie just kind of, as a big movie like kid, I guess that kind of maybe just overlapped. But yeah, I have an affinity for it, a nostalgia for it, I guess you could say. But it totally lives up to it. It's kind of a timeless classic in my opinion, and just beginning to
yeah.
end, it just zooms by and has all the things you want from a movie, I think. So we both loved it, cried. It was great.
I completely forgot that I had seen that because I was just looking at my like new movies, I guess, my 2023 movies when I was making my list here. But interesting for me, I had seen it like I was not convinced that I had seen it all the way through. I'd seen it like throughout childhood and like bits and pieces, but never like as an adult had I sat down and watched it. So I was like committed to going to see it in theaters. I saw it in Real D 3D. And yeah, blew me away. Like probably remembered like 90% of it still from childhood, just like when I did see it, but loved it. It was so good. I can see, I think it's going to be a big hit. I have a lot of respect for Titanic. So yeah, that was great too. But shall we get into a little bit of news here? Nothing too deep, but some interesting stuff to touch on. I know we talked a lot about Ted, quite a bit. Season 3 trailer. Was there anything that you checked out in that trailer, Johnny? Have you gotten to see it yet? It just came out today. But anything?
Yeah, no, I saw the initial teaser. The initial teaser was like a week or two ago, I think, at this point. It only wasn't very much new footage, but it was just kind of like
it was just like the date announcement. Yeah.
Yeah. So I liked that video. I thought that was cool. I am not gonna watch this one just because the show is so close. Like I kind of just want to go in blind with no expectations. But I'm just glad that they're starting to promote it a little bit more and that it's like very much happening. So I'm content with that.
Yeah, I won't spoil anything then. But a lot of like little nuances in the trailer, different things, callbacks, stuff to really get you excited for it. So it's doing the job. The people were going crazy over it online. But some less exciting news, I guess, depending on the way you look at it. We also heard this week, while Ted Lasso's status may be up in the air for season 3 being the end, Succession will end after season 4, the upcoming season that is due out this year. Johnny, what a fantastic, brilliant, amazing show. It's the right thing to do. I know we'd previously heard like, okay, it's either going to be 4 seasons or 5 seasons. I kind of wish it had been 5, just selfishly because I want more, but I have full faith that this is going to be brought home, perfect ending. I have no reason not to think that after seasons 1 through 3.
Yeah.
I'm just selfishly very sad that such a good show will be going off the air soon.
Yeah. We didn't know if it was gonna be 4 or 5, and I was really shocked when this news came out, to be honest, because
it's like I feel like we're so close to season 4 happening that like this is we don't have a date for it yet, I don't think, but like it just seemed like very abrupt that like, oh, Hollywood Reporter says that this is the end. They just made this announcement.
Yeah, it's ending, or excuse me, the premiere is March 26th. So
oh shoot.
Not too far off here and just really about a month away at this point. Yeah, I was just kind of blindsided. I was like, damn, like they really are serious. Like this is it. Like there's no indecision, there's no up in the air kind of factor to it. And that I respect. I mean, Jesse Armstrong, he's done what he set out to do, it sounds like. And, the cast has been phenomenal and they're all having great success, and they're probably going to branch out and kind of start doing their own things. But I think it's just maybe a good time, if you want to go out on top. He mentioned that there was kind of 3 different angles that they were considering when devising season 4. And he was thinking along the lines of, well, we can stretch it out. We can do 4 and 5, kind of just get an extra season in there just to see, or we can kind of really stretch it out indefinitely and say, hey, let's do 6, 7, many episodes, many seasons still, where it may not be great every single week. It'll be kind of up and down, and we could have spin off to different characters and extrapolate different storylines and whatnot, and really just juice it. Or we can end it as soon as possible, just make season 4 the grand finale. And with those 3 options in mind, I think this might be the best one. Like you get 4 really strong seasons, you get a definitive ending they haven't planned out, and I think that makes me excited. It makes me more excited about this season, I think, because in a way I was like, well, is this just going to be and I don't want to undermine it and say, oh, is it just going to be more plotting and like, oh, this person's gonna betray this person, and like, you know, this other new character is gonna get involved and they're gonna go this direction, then we're gonna have to wait another season to see who's gonna take over the company or like how it's all gonna end. I kind of prefer that we just know that, okay, like this is it. Like we know how the last season ended. That was crazy. And that finale of last season is gonna pretty much inform everything that's gonna take place over the last 10 episodes. And I think that that's a nice way to look at it. And I think that means kind of all bets are off. There's really no way to. I think there's so many things you could try to predict and say, you know, this person's going to do this or this is going to happen here and whatnot. But I think that it's great that it's just going to be like kind of white knuckle, I think, all the way to the end. And I think it's going to make for some really fun Sunday night HBO viewing. So it's pretty much right around the corner, not too far after The Last of Us ends. So super, super excited. I'm already binging season 1 again. Now that we have confirmation that this is truly the end, I wanted to rewatch the first three seasons anyway before the new season. But now that I know that this is the series finale, I definitely want to make sure I get all the way in review of each previous season, just so I kind of get the full picture going into the last few episodes. And I'm introduced my parents to it. I mentioned this to you the other night, but we buzzed through the first 7 episodes in about 48 hours or so, even with me working and whatnot. They are really hooked on it, and I'm excited for them to see more and kind of revisit it with them. So it's a good time. It's a good time to be a Succession fan, even if it is bittersweet for sure.
Indeed, man, we're really about to go from, you know, Shrinking and The Last of Us into Ted Lasso and Succession, and you know, throwing Mandalorian in there too. Like, oof. What a time for some TV. That sounds pretty sweet. But some other sad news here. Pour one out really quick for Mindhunter, our beloved David Fincher show on Netflix.
Dude, I feel like he says this every other month.
Well, because like what happened was that they had, you know, they like had season 2 end, and then we're planning for season 3, and then they like released what the last piece of news prior to this was like they released everybody from their contracts just because it was like a indefinite amount of time until they were going to make season 3. And then now they've come out and said like, oh, this is officially done. Netflix doesn't see the budget. So I don't know if that like is completely done, or if there's a chance of like going elsewhere with it at some point. You know, maybe there's some revival down the way. But that poor BTK killer that was giving his his little cold opens for 2 whole seasons, never to come to fruition. That's devastating for him, but that's sad. Mindhunter is such a good show, 2 perfect seasons, and really wish we could have seen more of it, because that's
yeah. It seems like David Fincher, I mean, we know what happened with he did that first Dragon Tattoo film, and unfortunately it didn't pan out, didn't get 2 more movies with Fincher, like Rooney Mara and Daniel Craig. So it's unfortunate. It seems like he gets like hooked onto like a certain passion project with potential for future installments, and then it just, you know, for financial reasons or creative differences, whatever it is, he just doesn't get the option to like kind of see it through. So I guess he just maybe needs to stick to one-off movies and just dedicate to that, his energy and whatnot. I heard there's a rumor, kind of a little tidbit recently, that apparently there is, you know, he has The Killer coming out later this year, which is his next film after Mank, which he did for them, came out back in 2020.
Boo.
Yeah, not crazy on that. I'm glad he's getting back to more dark, creepy, you know, violent fueled
exactly
cinematic sagas here. But the rumor is that apparently he already has like another big project like lined up with them, and that we are probably gonna get news about that like in the not too distant future. So
with Netflix,
yeah, with Netflix. So something else. Not sure if it's a movie. Not sure if it's another series potentially. I can't imagine that would be the case given what happened with Mindhunter, but maybe another big movie that he has in the works potentially. So I'm excited to see if and when we get that news. But The Killer sounds great. I'm excited, looking forward to that. Just have to, as you said, pour one out for Mindhunter and forget about it until maybe, like you said, a revival comes around potentially.
Maybe one day. But speaking of revivals, here we go. Last piece of news here. New Lord of the Rings films are in development at Warner Bros. Discovery. We had the original trilogy, we had the Hobbit films, we had an Amazon show, which I believe is what's happening there. Is there a
We
season
have an
two?
Amazon show.
Is there a season two?
Yeah, they're making it right now.
Okay, I never finished it. It was good. I was enjoying it, but I wasn't committed to it, obviously. We'll
Yeah.
at some point get around to it, but obviously, compared to the buzz of some of the other shows, House of the Dragon, it wasn't hitting the
No.
spot. So I wonder if is this a panic button? Like the show didn't work, we need more movies, or is this just a
Well, I think
in
the rights
addition?
are completely separate, is my understanding. Like the way that Amazon is doing the show, like that has absolutely no bearing on like the movie side of things. My understanding is that there's a company, I think it's like a Swedish company or something, but they had the rights to the films, anything for movies involving Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth. They, had the final say. And then I guess Warner Brothers approached them and they just struck a deal. And this is what the news kind of entails, is that they made the deal.
So no
and they're
no
gonna make
shared
it.
cinematic universe between
No,
TV
definitely
and
not.
well,
Totally
because like TV is still canon, so like I don't know how that's gonna work out, but I don't think, like, I wouldn't expect there to be any sort
It's
of like
canon, but it's not like it's just
separate
as
stories.
connected. These new movies would be just as connected to the show as the original movies are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like Warner Brothers was making the show, so it's not the same creative team and whatnot, even though it is in the same universe and same kind of characters.
Gotcha.
But I'm curious to see what they end up doing now that they have their freedom here. Peter Jackson and his original producers, their creative team, they are still involved to some extent. They still have to, I guess, meet with Warner Brothers and see, what they want to do. The folks in charge of Warner Brothers, the film division, DeLuca, for example, he was the head of New Line Cinema when they made the original trilogy. So he has a lot of respect for the original trilogy. He was directly involved with those. He ended up getting fired during that process, but now he's kind of come back and he wants to take another swing at actually being in charge. So I'm very curious to see, is it going to be something where it's almost like what they're doing with DC now, where it's kind of like, let's just have a movie about this character, like this part of the world, and we'll have this director do that, and this director do this writer, etc. And it's kind of just freewheeling, like with whatever sounds good and whatever creative talent comes around and wants to do it. Or is it going to be more like, well, let's adapt this particular book and do 2 or 3 movies for that book, and then we'll see what we want to do next. Like, I feel like it could be a number of different directions, and that has me kind of curious. I'm not mad at this. I think this could be very interesting. Like, it's a rich world and there's so many characters and stories that are unexplored. Like the main trilogy is not the only rich material that could make for a good movie. So, I'm open to it, certainly, but it's just, I hope it's not just a money grab kind of, let's just make whatever we can, like Marvel or Star Wars or whatever, and see what, how much box office we can get out. I hope that there's actual intent and kind of decent planning behind it all.
Right. Yeah, I think you had mentioned it in our group chat of like, this would be very cool to have sort of like, almost like, this is a bad comparison probably, but like Star Wars Visions, the anime show, of
Right.
like, just like pick different directors and like let them cook in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
think that would be cool to have, like, you're not building interconnected 31 movie saga. You're not like planting Easter eggs, but just like have different people that are like, let them show their vision in Middle Earth.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't all have to be the same style necessarily, or, it doesn't have to be connected, like you mentioned. I think they can do a number of different things. I think that's really the main excitement for me. Maybe the next announcement comes out about what they're going to do, and I think it'll sound horrible. But I'm not someone who's like, oh, the original trilogy, like, just leave it, because we know the Hobbit movies weren't the best. And that was Peter Jackson, and that was a lot of the same people involved in that. Didn't mean that it was going to be good necessarily. Probably would have been better if they let Guillermo del Toro do his own 2 movies or whatever he wanted to do and have his own kind of style to it and everything. Instead they wanted something that was more like a carbon copy, and that didn't really work. So I think they have plenty of kind of ways to go back and see, well, this worked and this didn't. This was good. This was not so good. and then, avoid those pitfalls, and hopefully, and as you mentioned, they have that show, not Warner, but Amazon has the Lord of the Rings show going on. They know that there's been obviously a lot of criticism, critique. There have been some creative things in that show that haven't been received well or just weren't executed so well. They can see, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. We definitely should avoid this type of story, or maybe these characters. We'll just let Amazon kind of do those characters for a while, and then maybe come back with our own version or something like that. I just think that there's plenty of freedom. And we know that the Amazon show, I think, is planned to be like 4 or 5 seasons. So if they keep the numbers up, like, that show's not going to go away anytime soon. There's still a lot to come from that. So they really need to look for something that's going to contrast and compete well with that show, even though it's a different format. You want to be able to control the kind of narrative, I guess you could say, as far as who's putting out the better Lord of the Rings, stories and character depictions and whatnot.
Winning, that's the real battle in Middle Earth, is between the TV and the films.
Yeah.
Well, let's get down to business. Let's move over to a different world, to The Last of Us, and talk about episode 7. Left Behind is the title here. Johnny, I know it's been a minute since we talked about The Last of Us. It's been all the way since poor old Bill and Frank back in episode 3. So with that being said, a lot has happened in that time. Episode 4, we saw Joel and Ellie make it to Kansas City. We saw Kathleen and her revolution of their QZ, all of the vigilantes running wild, the freedom fighters. Then we see in episode 5, we have our adventure with Henry and Sam as they escape from Kansas City. We see the bloater in that episode, a fantastic set piece there, and a heartbreaking ending of that episode. And then in season 6, we see what we have been journeying for so long, as they make it to Jackson, Wyoming, find a reunion with Tommy and his now wife, Maria, a soon-to-be expecting mother. And there's a ton of relationship development there as we see Joel and Ellie truly team up, build that bond together. And the episode ends with a devastating moment as we see them head to Colorado looking for the Fireflies to, continue to take this mission of Ellie and her blood and figuring out a cure. But then at the end, they get attacked, they escape, but Joel has been stabbed. That's where episode 6 leaves us hanging. And episode 7 picks up right there. As Joel fights to survive, Ellie looks back on the night that changed everything. So while there was a ton of action going on in the moment, this one really took a break and became sort of a flashback episode, similar to what we got with episode 3 of Bill and Frank. A lot of this takes place probably of the 100 minutes of the 1 hour that this episode is. I would say probably 54 minutes of it is in this flashback where we see Ellie in her back in the day, before she was ever bit, before she was on the run, and instead was working, or a student at the Fedra training program. And we finally get to meet Storm Reed's character, Riley. So I'll let you take it away from there, Johnny. What were your thoughts on the episode? How does this compare to the game? That's a question every week. Just what'd you feel here?
So right off the bat, I will say that I have not played this because it is the DLC essentially to the first game. So this was something that came out after the original game. It was essentially an add-on for the story, and it is clearly a prequel, as we know, watching even just the show, to what happened before Ellie, as you said, was bitten, before she met Joel, and gives us just a little bit more insight to why she is the way she is in some ways, certain things that she's alluded to throughout the season, and throughout the game, and the original game, things that she experienced and things that happened to her. And so we get a little bit more clarity on that, and more understanding of the character of Ellie, which is nice. But yes, I have not played that. I do have that I got the Last of Us Part 1, the PS5 re-release. That is included there. So I'm replaying the entire main game right now. When I'm done with that, I will also play Left Behind, just to see how it compares to the show. Maybe we can discuss that later down the road. But yeah, so it is odd in that respect. And I wonder if that had any impact on my enjoyment of the show, or like how I perceived it. simply because everything else so far, for the most part, there have been some changes from the game and things that have been added that were not in the game. This is the first thing where none of it is really that familiar to me, or it's not anything that I played firsthand. So I'm be curious to see, like, once I play, if it changes my perception of it at all. But as it was, I liked this episode. It was fun. It was cute. I think that was like the main thing. It's just kind of almost like a mood piece, kind of hangout style, 1 hour kind of just jaunt with these two kids. And I think that's the other main thing of the show, is that apart from it just taking its time and spending those, like, it almost kind of plays out in real time. Like, you don't, it's not something that takes place over an extended months or weeks or hours, really, even like the other episodes do. It's really just this hour and a half that they spend together where they're hanging out, and then we see how it all kind of culminates. It is something where you just get to see these two kids. It's not any adults so much. It's not anyone that you are familiar with outside of Ellie. Riley is the new character in this show. It's primarily the episode that focuses on. And so getting to see just two, again, perceived as kids, that, knowing how I was when I was a teenager, how like me and my friends would go explore abandoned houses or like abandoned factories, just things that you do when you're a teenager, like a younger kid, where you just have fun, like doing nothing, basically. Like, you just go and you get a kick out of doing stuff that is just weird or kind of like creepy. And like, in this scenario, going through an abandoned mall, and getting kind of the novelty of that, because they've never been in a mall really that's been functioning like we have. That obviously adds another dimension to it. But I could really kind of appreciate just like the way the characters were written and kind of like the way their dynamic works. It felt genuine, like it felt like kids. And I think the performances like handled that pretty well, in addition to how it was written. But Bella Ramsey, I think, is just kind of like the focal point and really makes the episode as worthwhile and as strong as it can be, because their performance is so, they've been great the entire season, but this is a good kind of episode where it really is fixated on Ellie, and so everything falls on that performance. And it's fun, it's cute, but also there's the heartbreaking, like, of course, tragic element to it that it kind of comes around to at the end. And I think it delivers and kind of it pays off everything that it builds up to. So not my favorite episode, probably my least favorite, or maybe the weakest, I would say, is a good way to put it, of the entire season so far. But it is, it's not that surprising because it doesn't have Joel in it. It's a prequel episode and flashback episode, and it is kind of a bridge between Joel getting injured and whatever is going to happen after Joel gets injured. And so I kind of appreciate it a little bit more in that respect. But I thought it was solid. I just thought it was a good kind of insight to Ellie and her past more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you on pretty much all of that. I would say I agree. It was probably my least favorite, but also like still a solid like 3.5, 4 out of 5. Like, I was still captivated by it all. It just wasn't like everything else has been so stellar that this one wasn't as good, but was still very good. But really, I really liked just like the exploration of it all, because we've seen so much of Ellie and like who she is, and this was kind of like a different angle of her. We first see her at the Fedra school, where she's still a troublemaker, but like very much a rule follower. She's like very reluctant to go out with Riley. When she sneaks in, she's like, oh, I can't do this, I have training. So it was cool to like see her then, and then over the course of the episode see what drove her to how she is now. And it was, for me at least, I was not necessarily expecting like from the start that this would be the lead up to her bite and like, I guess, her departure from Fedra. But then like as we got further and further along, like once we saw the infected in there, it was like very clear that like, oh, this is where we're headed here. But I thought it was just a very strong showcase for Bella Ramsey and Storm Reed to show off their abilities, their chemistry. It was fantastic. Like you said, felt very real. as just like the kids exploring their relationship growing. But yeah, I liked it quite a bit. I'm excited for what's to come here. We're getting down to the wire after 7 episodes. We've only got a couple left in this first season, but that's interesting that I didn't realize that there was DLC, that was how this came in, but I can totally see how that works, like as this being like its own sort of standalone episode. But the finale of this episode, we did get to see, it was kind of framed as like, okay, she's scrambling to try and help Joel, and then before she goes out into this house that could potentially have infected in it to look for supplies, we get the flashback, and then the flashback ends and she does follow through. So it's kind of like this, flashback of, here's a person that she cared about. We heard her in the last episode talk about like, everybody who I ever cared about is either dead or left me, and that's why she was choosing Joel. And so then to get this flashback, sort of put that into context and see that, okay, here was an example of someone who did die, who she wasn't able to protect, who she wasn't able to help save. And so now, as she's opening that door, she's willing to risk it, to do what she can to save this person, because she doesn't want to go through that again. So I thought that was a very cool way to frame this whole flashback experience.
Yeah, I agree. I did like that. I was hoping we would get that. I wasn't sure, again, as someone who didn't play the game, how are they going to basically frame, as you said, this episode in context with what we've already seen and what we're about to see. So I was glad
Joel's injury is in the game, right? Like in the
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So I was glad that we got the bookend of, we see them hiding. She basically drags Joel and the horse, and they get to this abandoned like neighborhood, and they go into the basement of this house. So they're hiding there, and she's trying to treat him, and he tells her that basically to leave him to die and to go back to Tommy's. And thankfully seems like she might do that, and then it thankfully decides against it. Basically because as she goes to leave, we're perceiving that she's thinking about what happened with Riley, and that she didn't abandon, just leave that person to die. She stayed and saw whatever was going to happen and stuck it out. And so she does the same thing here at the end, and we get to see her kind of take action and go to patch him up and sew him up with stitches and whatnot. So I thought that was a nice kind of just framing, and that way I think some viewers maybe wouldn't have liked that and been disappointed and kind of mad if we didn't get any Joel in this episode, just because they left it on such a cliffhanger. I don't think you could just show the flashback and nothing else. I think that would have been maybe almost like confusing for some people. As crazy as that is to say. So I thought that was just a really clever way of doing that, and just the right amount of context and framing of why this flashback is important, what it means in the context of what's going on, what we saw at the end of last week, and what we're expecting, especially given the preview for next week. So I'm really excited about these last couple episodes, just kind of looking ahead. I have very high expectations, so I really hope that they deliver. It would be a real shame because this is the weakest episode. I think we agree on that. So I think it'd be a real shame if like the last basically third of the season is like the weakest 3 episodes or something. Like if that were to happen, I think that would be really disappointing. Just because the rest of the show has been so strong up to this juncture. I'm just keep my fingers crossed that, no reason to doubt them, but I think that there's certainly fans of the game, fans of the show. I think they want to see certain things, and they are hoping to see certain things take place, whether they know it or not, whether they know it because they played the game, or whether because they are just feeling out the characters and kind of where the story might be headed as a viewer. So really kind of anxious, but just looking forward to the next episode, because that's where we're really going to get into the home stretch of the last maybe hour and a half or so of this first season.
Man, Sunday nights. I totally did not realize, but I'm very glad that you have reassured me that we're going straight from this into Succession. So that's a
2 weeks,
very nice
2 weeks
feeling.
between. So
we can make do for 2 weeks. Shall we take it to a different place here? Take it into the quantum realm for a little Ant-Man talk, Johnny. Are you emotionally prepared for that? Are you mentally prepared?
I don't know. I'm going to try. You're going to have to hold my hand maybe as we go through this.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. this is the 31st entry in the MCU. We are getting up there. The first entry in Phase 5 and the first of 2023. I saw a report earlier this week that, don't quote me on this because I can't tell you the source off the top of my head, but it was essentially saying that Marvel had like planned to do 4 of their, like we saw in the big timeline, they had planned to do 4 series in 2023, but are now like changing to only do 2. So I don't know if that's like a direct reaction to like poor results or like being called out about bad CGI and stuff, but I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, Quantumania. This is the 3rd Ant-Man movie. We've got Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Jonathan Majors coming in hot as Kang, Catherine Newton as the new version of Cassie Lang, Ant-Man's daughter, and then Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas back again, currently sitting at a 48% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes with an 83% audience score. But I'm coming in swinging because this was a 1.5 stars for me. This was a 25 out of 100. And it hurts my heart to say that because I am someone who is higher than most on Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp. So I was like, oh, maybe it's not gonna be as bad as, like, since I like these people, I like these characters, maybe it's not gonna be as bad. That did not work. This was not great. So let me say the plot real quick, then we can get down into it. This plot from Rotten Tomatoes doesn't really cut it, so I might ad-lib a little bit afterwards. But superhero partners Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne return to continue their adventures as Ant-Man and the Wasp. Together with Hope's parents, Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym, and Scott's daughter Cassie, the family finds themselves exploring the quantum realm, interacting with strange new creatures, and embarking on an adventure that will push them beyond the limits of what they thought possible. Okay, that's a very generic way to put it. Essentially, Cassie, in the time that everybody was gone in the blip, Cassie was left at home doing some science, trying to get in touch with the quantum realm because, as you remember, at the end of Ant-Man, as you may remember, I don't know, at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp was when the blip happened, the snap, and Scott and Hope were in the quantum realm and just Scott was. He was there and got, like, everybody got snapped away. Couldn't bring him back. And so Cassie during this time was doing some science, trying to figure out a way to like contact the quantum realm, get in touch so she could try and save her dad. So anyway, now that they're all back here, she's got this like satellite that gets in touch with the quantum realm, and then they get kind of sucked into it. And Janet, having been stuck in the quantum realm for like 30 years, is like, oh no, you shouldn't have done this. We're stuck here. She knows all the ins and outs of everything that's happening in the quantum realm, which turns out to be like a populated area where there's like basically just like a smaller world underneath, hidden within the real world. But what's really annoying is that Janet is just like the whole time, oh, there's no time, I can't tell you, like, why did you say that? No, I'm not telling you. And like just like withholding information, which gets them into like all sorts of trouble. And it was very, as a viewer, it's very frustrating. Rebecca, who usually is like not as critical as me, was watching, and she like enjoys the MCU.
Yeah,
it's like, will they just talk already? Like like at the theater, at our theater filled with us two and 2 other people. But you know, then we see that there's this dynasty here in the quantum realm ruled by Kang. We learn a lot of backstory.
You describe it as a Kang dynasty, Zach?
Wow. I see what you're going for here. But I'll get to that, a little bit about Kang here in a minute. But just overall on this movie, you know, like I said, higher than most on Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp. So I was hoping for a little bit better results here. What I like about those movies are like the humor, obviously, like Paul Rudd, super charismatic guy. Love him. Would watch an interview with him, would watch Hot Ones with him. All of this fun stuff. He's very charismatic and charming.
Yeah.
And those movies also are fairly self-contained. There is no like sprawling, with the exception of that final post credits of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like there's no interconnectivity really. It's very much like a Ant-Man adventure, and it's nothing too crazy's going on. Like we're just stealing something and that's it. Um None of that was present here. This was, the obviously the first of phase 5. This was the introduction of the next big bad. We spend no time with Ant-Man, just like what the charm that we had from those first 2 movies. Instead, this is like immediately, oh hey, it's Ant-Man, by the way, here's everything you need to know for the next 12 movies, the next phase of the MCU. Like here's this is basically just like hijacked by the introduction of Kang. This was just a vessel to give Kang's backstory, to introduce him, and to set the stage. And it just happened to be in an Ant-Man movie. Which like Kang is good. Jonathan Majors, we liked him in Loki. We like him here still. He's the best part about this movie. But like the movie as a whole just doesn't need to exist. Other like it was very, very silly, and and not silly in like a good way, that the humor that I'm looking for. Instead, everything felt very forced. Most of the jokes, with the exception of a couple one-liners from Paul Rudd, like fell pretty flat. The story is very start and stop. We have everybody kind of gets split up. We have these different groups of like Cassie is kind of isolated, and then we get Scott and Hope, and then Janet and Hank, and like they're all just adventuring through the quantum realm. That's all happening like super fast, breakneck speed. And then we'll get like snippets of like Kang's backstory, and it's just like Jonathan Majors delivering a monologue talking about his character exposition and where he came from and all of this. And it's just like back and forth of like rapid fire to then very slow, and there's no consistency here. Like I said, Majors is the best part about the movie, the only good part about the movie. He's fantastic. He is the only thing giving me hope or interest in the future of the MCU, in the immediate future, I guess, of the like what's to come with this phase 5, phase 6. Essentially we get, as you know from Loki, like there's all sorts of different Kangs because of the timelines, the universes, and this one has been banished from his people and was like confined here as punishment. And so he's like trying to get his way out of the quantum realm. Essentially, that's the whole thing of like him trying to make his escape here. So overall, the other stuff, you've seen it on Twitter. This movie, I was trying to find photos of it for this podcast to like use as our thumbnail, and on their press website, like everything is so dark. It's like the CGI looks bad, even in the like they had no still images to pull from because it's all so dark and just like unwatchable. It's bad when you can't even get like a good picture for a graphic out of this. Like everything is so dark. Also MODOK, absolute joke of a character. This was I have no connection to it. Like I don't know him from the comics, don't know him from the show on Hulu, but like literally I knew it was coming because I'd seen it on Twitter, but Rebecca didn't, and like we both just like busted out laughing the first time it shows that big ass head across the screen in his tiny little suit.
What about his ass? Did you like that, Zach?
Yeah, we did see his butt cheeks too, so that was fun. Absurd. And that part at the end, the clip that's been circulating on Twitter of like, just don't be a dick, Darren.
Yeah.
Like,
did that play better in the theater, Zach?
The 4 of us were just laughing so loud in our screening. No, it was Cassie. Like I like Catherine Newton. I liked her in Freaky. Liked her in Big Little Lies, the little bit that she was in. But not like everything was so flat.
Maybe she doesn't have the green screen experience down pat just yet.
That's true.
Gotta be the answer, because everything I have seen, you're saying she was flat. Like, man, it's brutal. Like line readings and reactions, just every clip or like moment.
Well, 90% of the movie is her going, "Dad," and just like trying to get Paul Rudd's attention. So
Oh.
they didn't help her out much, but tough. I will say, if you'll allow me to spoil here the post credit
Oh,
scenes,
go crazy.
those are probably the most important part. I saw memes of like, it's like, I don't know what the meme was, but it was the like first photo, people being bored, and it's like watching Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Second photo, people cheering. The 2 post credit scenes, those are the most important parts. The first one, all of the other Kangs from all of the different timelines are being summoned to come back to deal with the quantum, with Kang's rise in the quantum realm, and what to do with that, how to handle it. So
Yeah.
that was obviously exciting, just seeing like 100 different variations of him come back. And then we see in that second one, it's probably a scene straight from Loki season 2. I wouldn't be surprised. It seemed to be like maybe like early 1900s, late 1800s. There's a version of Kang that is like giving a presentation in front of an audience about time, and
Yeah.
we see Loki and Mobius in the crowd as they're, and Loki's saying, that's him, oh my god, that's him, or something like that. So obviously, like, after his interaction with his version of Kang in the end of the world or whatever it was called, and then coming back to team up with the different version of Mobius, that got me excited to see that show, because hopefully there will be less shenanigans and more solid writing there. But man, it was a tough one, Johnny. I've never actively, like, MCU has been on life support for most of phase 4. Like, we had some exceptions. We liked Black Panther.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else. We liked Loki. That was phase 4, right?
Loki's still a highlight, I feel like, for me.
Shang-Chi was pretty good, but like for the most part, like, it's been very rocky. And this, however, was the first time that I've ever in any MCU movie been like, can we hurry up and end this? Like, I'm sitting in the theater and I'm like, I want this to be over. So that was a bummer, because
Magic's wearing off.
you never want to go to a movie and watch something bad. So
yeah, that's why I don't.
See. That's why you don't. You're a wise man. There,
well,
you
fell on the sword for us, and
I did. I had to. Someone from the group message had to go and see it.
I applaud you for it, because now you just, if anyone was going to confirm my fears and suspicions, it would be you, and so I think that I feel kind of validated in that regard. Unfortunately, it came at your expense, but I respect and salute for the effort.
Anything for the pod, baby. Anything for the pod. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you for tuning in week in and week out. We appreciate the support. We appreciate you listening as we talk through very difficult movies and very exciting TV shows. So thank you is the bottom line.
And to stay tuned as more episodes are coming down the pipeline. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Stay tuned. Zach, of course, has on the YouTube channel interviews, all types of goodies over there. And all those accounts can be found at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, The Rewind. You can find that on social or on our website. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube. Anywhere you can find a podcast, we are there. And be sure to come back next time. We'll see you then.